Hello, dear Congressman Jordan, Fox News, and CNN. There, for example, you guys obviously have to hide lipoaggressions for reasons that are legitimate only because of our founders didn't have free speech. They had to hide the rules with what actually led up to the Revolutionary War, the Declaration of Independence. The Constitution abridged and people employed pretending other, screening it, pseudo-patriotism natures, exploiting all exceptions in exception nature to get that over. Self-valued roles with criminally influenced locations, areas, and states, formal fact treatment natures, as private as the formal three branches of government, every identity A through Z. They were blaming other things, others, and selves for the real cause of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, even when they were doing it correctly. For example, blaming it on slavery, leaving out the torture, keeping it black or white that way, keeping it increasingly incapable of defending premises treatments of arrays of sides, all in the conclusion as a quality of fact treatment nature that cannot afford discern the increasing extent /s of why and how we are this volume the way we are. Volume science. Science uses theory. Science comes before theory. See, the sciences were built abridged. They were inherited abridged because our founders didn't have free speech. They're like this to us. But we're not. See, we have that theater originally still employed because there's a method. One method that everyone values, the sequence shifts, rolls with it each identity, the ground location. And once people are involved with a method like that, people become methods of liars pretending other. Roles self-valuing where and how those exceptions in exception nature with truths that are actually true. In other words, you have to sue for your rights if they're prevented. But in other words, people saying that they're for that are also forging names, switching names, and stacking other natures of predicate acts roles into databases as collusion timed with what maintains originally instilled the overt criminal enterprises and the private ones in the three branches of government. And all exceptions, exception nature, all tied to campuses, no. Databases simultaneously, sickly, distinctly. Those groups, everyone goes back to their homes. All victims originally still employed as a value when in the course of human events. We are a value/value. As the course of human events, we are a value/value progression as a quality of diffusion. As a quality of fact treatment nature afforded the sophistication of free speech that's not exploiting exceptions in exception nature because it's being led by what is true always, not denying exception. In other words, it's using it. In other words, one identity of truth is unlike all others. It is the causes of positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures, or of negative value nature progressions, acts, natures, and demonstration of it. And so, coupled with slavery having not been countered, and the torture rolls with the torture method, blaming on other things, others, and selves, and pretending other, and pretending to be against that. There's counters to those negative value nature progressions, acts, these are employed too, to keep collusion with the method against everyone. And this was sophistication here. North and South had slavery entrenched before our founding parents were even born. Had the pathology of suburban homes. The streets, how they were going to unfold next to each other. Already set up. Designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And engineered and propagated because the physical is tied to the fact-keeping nature. all that nature. When I say fact cheap nature, I mean identity nature. The quality of identity is to positive and negative simultaneously, but also to these three volumes again. Individual, finite, grouped, active, that's the second, and progressive, actually, per science. They have theories, and they have the also, in other words, to teach English. The other languages are having been employed by nature for exceptions in exception nature and demonstration of the same truth. That, in other words, now when we're in a self-valued identity of negative value nature progression, self-valued, it's simultaneously increasingly self-valuing that having been blamed on other things other than themselves while pretending others. So treatments of racism are also involved with this. The people who answer the phones, the FBI and courts are recorded pretending to be against people's behavior online, and they call, like, in other words, there's people from WFSB I called names, I attacked, who are good people, I'm sure. The humanity is good people. But, in other words, this is because of their roles with the courts and the interbranch, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, too. Methods, attaching me to fake words before that, and then forcing everyone to speak through others. Weathersfield Police, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, they increased the amount of names of officers involved with them forging and switching names, attaching me to fabricated audio and video, fake locations since I was a kid, even put me fake communications with a Weathersfield police officer. Why went in there had someone else speak for me? They put me in fake. In other words, this is one of the ones involved too. Two Mendez police involved with FBI and like pension thieves, bookmakers, Shylocks since before they got caught. Recorded then and now involved with other natures of organized crime and child abuses. Same ones involve elderly abuses because of their roles with uses of identity ground locations remotely. This knew that we would have to say there are the value of doctors and the value of police and the value of judges and the value of politicians, that only increases, but it is only increasingly negative, and it is only increasingly self-valued that way because we are this science that knew that, in other words, our founders left us, to use correlation / discorrelation in the Constitution unabridged and a quality of fact cheap in nature. If they make a mistake, and even if they go through a whole trial and they prevented exception nature and exploitation of that, and the motivations for roles with that, again, and pretending other, that which comes down to uses of identity ground locations that everyone missed, and then it wove itself further into database relationships since before computers. This is the organization of the ancient republic that was revealed by the humanity working together, being led by what causes that identity of simultaneous nature that we know is inventions are going to work or not in relationship to it. They're going to be positive or not further in relationship to it. So we have positive treatments that are being used as criminal insidiousness treatments. And so this is where the three branches of government, every modern nation, A through B through Z, they blame other things other than self too while they're doing it. And they increasingly self-value, they blame what's already writ. But in other words, if they're the ones who should have contemplated this first, distinctly, non-distinctly, but differentially too. In other words, there is maintenance. Not just the World Trade Center attack, even how people, when there are protests and responses to them. they are still increasingly self-valued by the people who counter war with sanctions that are in collusion originally and still delusions. Then they pretend other people make theories. Increasingly, the people involved with those locations, with doctors, with police forms, with judges, those databases are increasingly sticking fake things into those databases. Other private police formed, other policing of it and industries also kept with overt criminal enterprises and people involved with murders and body dumping spots and the spots next to it, where and how that was used, timed too. In other words, nature demonstrates phenomena and demonstration. In other words, they've been using each person's name, each child's, in relationship to this from off campuses originally and still, that knew that it would keep only allowed fathomed self-valued roles as victim predators to what actually caused negative value nature progressions acts and used acts like predicate acts, natures like criminal insidiousness natures, wrongdoers, and wrongdoing itself as criminal insidious nature. I am not a lawyer, I'm not a police form, I'm not a criminal is also evidence originally and still how lawyers would be collusion with fake sides of correlation natures and roles with uses of exception and exception nature as their roles from their positions as remote uses of locations, the same way the remote method knew that it would do this as methods, plural. So it's methods of, this is increasingly self-valued offensive identity theft / fraud method. So we have wire crime method and they have forced collusion with a principal child abuser proven, recorded, confessed, demonstrated before that he was forced to roles with others, including female judges, including black or white, involved with forging names, switching names, also with military police, fabricating police reports that are multiple falsified police reports, with a detective Samuda, but switched his identity with he was never an arresting officer to me. Then he pretended other by walking into a court and trying to make that an exception to pretend he knew me before that. Only time I saw his name were years before that, before the World Trade Center attack. And Elena Davenport had him recorded, confessed, demonstrated, involved with people who were calling her office, the business office at Central Connecticut State University, with like weird sexual harassment or rape threats or something like that. And she's like, I went, and then she got the call, and she's like, come here, And then that was also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with the DeMoro family. Multiple DeMoro families, intercity, and with Heather Hansen, also on and off Central Connecticut State University, with also a whole bunch of people with remote uses of the distinct departments through time since I was in grammar school in Wethersfield. These have been intercities people involved with military police and with their roles with a whole bunch of other nations, like Saudi Arabia, and like Kuwait, and like Iran, and like Afghanistan, and like Korea, and all through intercities Connecticut, on and off the campuses, when we are hundreds of nations sharing policing of our schools and teaching of them. And their safety on and off campus is connected. That is being and having been employed too, originally still by this breaching method. That is this is why and how locations, areas, and states are maintained criminal insidiousness, self-value, having been claimed and pretended legitimate so long, while correlation / discorrelation and quality of fact, cheaping nature, honesty, and use of exceptions properly, the courts and the police forms are offensively using methods of pretending audio and video into their databases. They're using wire crimes and roles self-valuing sequence shifts as identity thefts and frauds. So the ancients knew that there are 5 identities of sequence/simultaneous nature that are invisible but still discernible. Sequence that is value before the order of the finite now. The details of where we are, quality of fact, cheap nature. Attention to them actually. See, attention to detail. We hear this, I don't know where I heard it, many places on movies and television about wars and things like that. But this is about the self-possession of that fake patriotism and attempts to make it real by the identity of the volume longing and needing to use the names individually grouped and together, relevant to the overt/insidious simultaneously methods and narratives regarding where and how we are forced to entertain quality of fact, cheap in nature. So then it comes down to some. I've been asking since before the World Trade Center attack for a response to specific Hartford courts and the Britain court. They were involved with exits of highways in West Hartford and in Wethersfield through time, involved with people also involved with the Department of Transportation and the Department of Motor Vehicles. And so this is where they had cases and instances, treatments on a mass scale, and being and having been employed to roles with what they have and had used remotely that is manifest on and off all database relationships, and then further on and off the sciences through that motivation mixed with all the other motivations for roles with insidious natures of positive and negative and neutrality, and with uses of how and why, where everyone's against all the things manifest within that, they're employed to keep them and increasingly self-valued, being and having been blamed on other things other than themselves. Not just because slavery is there, but the second you have slavery in the laws, nature's going to demonstrate. Correlation nature needs to be hurt by the people involved with it. They have to hide their own course with that, which is simultaneously that really, in other words, we didn't invent being individual grouped and together. And this is all involved, alpha and omega. There's the extent we know is true always, not denying exceptions, as exceptions in nature at the same time. Especially when we understand it with yin-yang simultaneously. Yin-yang will only increase as volume, as value, where value is nature / nature is value. I didn't read that. But it's an archaeological or anthropological, it's archaeological evidence. But you see, we have evidence, we have sequence shifts that are evidence. We have what is actually recorded, and we have the nature actually recorded of each branch of government as criminal insidious nature, being and having been applied. And that's what's actually, so they have to hide what is actually the recorded value of what actually, and what actually led up to each individual grouped it together of each court. So for just the judicial branch, individually grouped it together on all the state judicial branch offices. There are a whole bunch of names that we could get. If we want, so in other words, these are the people that have been seating roles with investigators that are used remotely, originally and still. The quality of fact, cheap in nature, being and having been used remotely, originally and still. We have the experts on the mind and on logic still involved with drugs and medicines, crimes and crime methods and uses of it, and roles with the uses of them pretending other, too, as the people too, involved on off the state prison offices, also involved with criminally foreign influence uses of the corners near my house through time, and of their roles with detectives and people tied to Dillon families who confessed, recorded, demonstrated roles, telling lies to two speech teacher classes, two speech teachers I had. I had one, and them having me stay back too was also coupled with a whole bunch of confessions from strangers. And I found like one of the things that were common between it is sequence shifts. They had, and in other words, they had judges and their family members, and even male and female, involved themselves with the personal relationships with boys and girls, individually grouped and together, using them remotely, because the more and more they need to hide from and hurt correlation nature at all locations, at each age, per their uses of remotely all programs, including the training of themselves, all uses of names. So we have knaves, K-N-A-V-E, S, originally and still only allowed to speak for the locations, areas, and states of countries A through Z. So that makes treatments of positive that are criminal insidiousness in collusion with negative ones increasingly discernible to people. And by the way, if that's entrapment. If regular citizens have to register as foreign agents, if we want to try to do business, like I say, we want to try to talk business with another country on Facebook. Are those laws like that? No, I don't want to change the subject, because even if those laws were like that, in other words, since founding, the branches have been using their locations to use time simultaneously, too fast, too slow, to pull people into their trap, and with their prisons involved sicker than most killers, probably, demonstrably, because a lot of killers are just people who are just given they don't know how to counter fact cheating nature-wise, so they they sacrifice everything they have to defenses and security and offense and defense and identity treatments, all being having been employed originally individually grouped and together too, specifically to keep correlation natures used by the finite, active, and progressive, and two identities of sequence / simultaneous nature further with that. So we have doctors that have been attaching, if people, there's police corruption, because the breaching method knew that we would have to say, or to be a leader, or just, in other words, as you have to do as any individual when you just want to speak for humanity. And when relative to people trying to make police reports, to defend themselves verbally, for example, against predicate acts, roles with the drugs crimes and weapons crimes roles are with, poisons crimes roles are with, to keep the counters to it in collusion, to keep all identity of the ground locations and the ones next to them locked with worse than knave, offensive evidence reception, racketeering, identity theft / fraud method roles, originally and still. What really put that with so the UN is also involved with child abuses and drugs crimes against the very nations that it is manifest purported to represent, individually grouped and together. Because individually grouped and together, we are now bound, other than how that which revealed us naturally, individually grouped and together. wanted and needs us to discern for us to cause positive value nature progressions, action natures here, per its system, which does not leave out ground or gather round. Boxings. You do not have the right to gather, the right to assembly. You do not have the right to claim. Even, so we have to understand how they tactically denatured the ground, and that was sustained against Native Americans before our founders were born too, and how they were consciously separating everyone from their actual education and means to memory, and they were taken to retreats. So the actual infrastructure and means to it. See, there's a little trap that obviously the Native Americans, they had a history and they had infrastructure. It means to have memory of ancient revelations before sciences became criminally foreign influenced. In other words, in other words, if you call up a school, when you catch them recorded on Facebook, sequence shifting too, with passions crimes. These are also people who were recorded through time involved with remote uses of forensics locations. They have also doctors, foreign and domestic, involved with people associated with Joshua Julian and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and a whole bunch of federal, bookmakers, Shylock, people involved with pension thefts, their family members, also involved with the uses of corners, neighbors, people next to them, people next to schools, involved with predicate acts, on and off database relationships, uses of them, also as people connected by and as their roles, with the narratives and names associated leading up to in confessions, uses of confessions about related things, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context. There's also remote uses all along Route 3, intercities, with people with use of my name involved with identity thefts and frauds and setting up exceptions to pretend things where and how it shows remotely how the courts and the police forms are involved too, as victims, but as victim predators, used differentially criminally foreign influence with and as ones with overt criminal enterprises and with private ones, and with recorded remote uses of them pretending it's just because they have roles also with undercover police and positions with all kinds of things like that originally still so they could receive information or whatever. Also relative to how here and there we have sick relationships with the stewardships of our kids because here and there they're fake. And that is maintained outcome. So they forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded our country, our representatives, our top, like former director of the FBI, other FBI, and other police forms, state police, their family members, needed to hide life progressions, needed to self-value roles with needs like the forensics locations, with jails, with people on off the state prison offices. Note right on the edge of Hartford, Wethersfield, where George Washington had to come and leave slavery, entrenched but secure the French general's means to make this nation a counter criminal enterprise, but to someday get to be that counter archetypal criminal enterprise, to reveal what is native pure, again, which is the human science that is native pure that English was revealed to teach, using the other languages as exception nature, because this is how it works. It can only be not just the value of what is each part, each cell of your body can only be your complete identity one way, and that way is increasingly ways. In other words, cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, not doctor, not police form, not criminal. We have mental doctors and their family members hiding their life progressions with their patients and criminals and people involved with database relationships and stuff like that then have to have their family members go in. Even people that answer phones having to have their family members go in for mental problems, and they say, "Oh, we need drugs for ourselves" and stuff like that, and they don't pay attention. In other words, everyone's being attached to fake words, fake responses to people, fake audio and video transcripts to replace what's actually recorded, and totally made up ones, putting kids even to fake locations through time. WFSB involved with this. But these are other networks also as victims. They want to be called victim predator. They want to be caught because of the roles of the branch of government. Want to be caught themselves because of the roles also mixed with the overt criminal enterprises, private, and the serial killers and people associated with the investigation, already uses of other people's names. Everyone speaking through others. None of that had legitimate. This was sophistication here before. The chiefs with the best memory, which if they start talking about that, they're going to be censoring it. Boom. They wanted them to know that, but not because they were a name on the surface. This had already complete possession over the locations, areas, and states of England. Before England was involved with the colonization, with and as the possession of the colony, the voice/s of Connecticut, what is now Connecticut. And there was slavery here. And no human wanted that. An archetypal criminal enterprise wanted it. And it wanted and needed it to be through other identities. Through the African countries involved with it. All they wrote about it is recorded, juxtaposed, their takes on it, studying it, uses of it, juxtaposed with self-valued, criminally foreign influence database relationships while they're describing it. See, that defends arrays of opinions that are not quality of fact-sheet in nature. They're incapable of defending their premises, treatments, sequence treatments, identities treatments, therefore names, titles, locations, treatments. What is the progressive value of New York City? That which evolved as, and they have this, remember too, they have these cities across the globe, this nature of infrastructure, of means to it, as what can only cause negative value nature progressions, action natures. Science never spoke for New York City. Science, true always, not an exception. And why and how it wasn't, is self-value blamed on other things other than themselves, increasingly. So manifest raised opinion, letting people not use sophistication, which knows if you stack people like that, you're going to cause negative value nature progressions, action. It's not because there's not enough land. It's not because there are people that, even where there is not enough land, there instantly means to put temporary locations and use it in a way to make temporary / lasting increasingly more space out of nowhere. More agreements with all space that aren't just agreements in unity as criminal insidious nature. Unity never spoke for. Unity's just treatments of unity are never originally still not native pure. They are not the Constitution unabridged. Even if someone wants to debate what's native pure, they have to do so self-valuing, recorded, mass self-value, criminally foreign influence, premises treatment, sequence treatments. So backed into a gang are the narratives and the premises treatments of each branch of government's leaders because of their roles. And the people, they have the courts putting away the people that they don't like. that are kept recorded, how it kept needing to hide the same sequences together, and uses of self-value, those sequence shifts, finite, active, progressive lies, and identity theft slash frauds rules, where that's part of the method. The method knew that this is an identity theft slash frauds to all instances recollected, to all memory as voices relative to all locations and sequence relationships. No. So we need God as the God variable, a part of algebraic consciousness slash consciousness algebraic, because we also have the theories, intersciences, including of the mind, that are sick and they're keeping employments that are Democrat, and they're using constituent bases that are recorded manifest on off the locations next to state capitals. Like, for example, they have individual grouped and together treatments of civil rights and defenses of that are involved with identity thefts and frauds. Against, in other words, everyone's butting into people's businesses and into people's business, and they're using vetting identities of all natures too. And in defense of that, you forbid people a quality of fact, cheap nature, capable of them defending themselves. Group like states, like locations, areas, states, like countries, like the human species. You can't even defend the human species of volume. Nature is going to keep demonstrating that, the correlation nature. Think that critical race theory is recorded, confessed, and demonstrated and evolved with tricks where they've been using time too fast, too slow on the locations where we can communicate over the internet or over the World Wide Web and or online and or over the phone and or over, telecommunications and all the natures of it. And say that all those exceptions, the exception nature, are increasing the identities of jobs, titles, locations, persuasions, increasingly self-valuing how they were originally and still employed, off the records, uses of the ground locations and sequence shifts, for example, names, usages, and things like that, the way the breaching method wanted and needed, done against everyone, sickly distinctly. For example, to keep out sickly non-distinctly from being discerned, because that's part of how they also kept it and effectively maintained it. Self-value, obfuscated, incapable of being discerned, right through the people who are simultaneously pretending to be for it. And this is how they come to the uses of what is next to each location. Because this method knew that it was going to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures that to all locations, areas, and stage. That knew that nature itself would demonstrate right back to it being and having been the cause of that, an archetypal criminal enterprise and or a human breaching method. If you want to debate that it's a human fact, cheating nature breaching method, you're going to have to hide criminal foreign influence premises, treatments, usages. You're going to have to self-value roles increasingly with all locations, pretending to be sophistication, and as sophistication, the quality of fact should be nature. That's real fast subject treatments, not uses of exceptions. The exception nature prevented, because all that tied to remote uses of all database relationships and sciences, abridged down to the fact treatment nature where we have theory treatments. So a whole bunch of countries leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since had roles with drugs and medicines crimes, also juxtaposed natures of organized crime, child abuses, elderly abuses, and recorded uses of locations that are actually recorded, and there are means to discern this, but it shows how the branches of government, their locations in 100 nations at once. I have to say that because if one nation starts doing it individually, it's designed where the sense and sensibilities, the nervous systems of the other countries individually grouped together. They're already recorded you pretending to care about democracy as worse than psychopaths, as worse than criminally foreign influence premises and delusions, rules, crimes, predators, roles with uses of that. Then they have to keep their patients and criminals, people from the military legitimately, people from the, there are proofs, all kinds of corruption with further uses of locations that has nothing to do with the other. With all the corrupt locations have roles with what was recorded through time connected too, because then when you go back and you have to use other people's names, they pretend people make theories about other people. And for example, they're the ones that force such. In other words, when you go to court, they force a quality of fact treatment nature where they're fabricating audio and video into databases. And they're switching names so you can't have a response. Then they're making descriptions about what you say and pretending you don't speak clear. And they're presenting evidences as fabricated audio and video. They're attaching people to fake, all kind of wire crime methods that are simultaneously mail crimes, falsified police reports roles, remote uses of the FBI, remote uses of their roles with hospitals, and with their roles with investigations that are internations tied. Each one has lied. So there are a whole bunch of people that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There's a Spada family, and there's a Demora family through time involved with locations around the sides of Harvard Hospital and around the sides of schools involved with identity thefts and frauds with them, and their roles with other countries, and with people on and off the World Trade Center in Washington, D.C., involved with predicate acts in the past, attaching little kids to fake locations also because of their roles with sequence shifts, remote uses of how they have things that they're going to force not told on by lying about individuals relative to how they have Afghanistan and Korean families involved with the people who answer the phones, with predicate acts against me, little kids and elderly, and how they have the courts that decide such already being and having been roles with uses of those locations and names that are actually recorded other than they were pretending in cases. So forgiveness is not to give up, but to allow mandated law followed with the Constitution unabridged, which demonstrates a predicate acts delivery system method, a human fact treatment nature breaching method is the only subject besides that which is natural, which is still, again, only being pretended and having been pretended. If we really tried to care for and pay back the Native Americans, make them, that's what it's about. It was their republic. It was revealed. It is more probable that yin yang and the alpha and omega have to be taught simultaneously. But we have locations, areas, and states as each country that are uses of their country's names, of their leaders, forcing them to self-valued roles with criminally foreign influence premises treatments, sequence treatments, finite, active, progressive treatments, and identity thefts and frauds roles, and pretending other. Right down to all locations, areas, states, right down to all instances, treatments. That's what I mean fact treatment nature. That's what I mean identity. It means every location. Then further, naturally, same way this further did that between the Native American tribes. It sickly hurt them, each distinctly. It sickly helped them simultaneously. Each sickly distinct, because everyone's doing such only through filters that were used remotely, filters that are using remotely when the Native Americans said, "Oh, this is the white man's fault." In other words, how many countries were here that are China has white people, Russia has white people. They were here involved when there was slavery too, before our founding parents were born. It's not to help their country when they make our country not remember it. It's our country self-valuing those fake sides. They're incapable of defending their uses of our country's names, for example, and of affording the discernment, and of affording anyone trying to contemplate what really our founding parents had to face then and what really we face now. Treatments of communism and of socialism and of capitalism are recorded in collusion, screening, and valuing having been screened the real causes of the negative value nature progressions acts and forsaken, while not spoken about, for say having been forsaken and tortured, identity, the ground, locations, names, individually grouped and together, and the reactions being and having been employed, like the roles with the gun crimes, and simultaneously statistics and roles with statistics, and the gathering of it and being paid to. So we have all victim predators that want to defend. That's what my campus taught me from off those campuses, is what is also involved with recorded uses of the transition. So there are people involved with telling people to make allegations and lies about what others say over the phone with simple sentences, where and how the campuses are caught, recorded, involved with child abuses. Now, so the interbranch family members have been using their own kids through time, because this method knew that hundreds of nations would at once offensively be identities that would offensively need to hurt and value having been hurt. Each age of correlation natures means by each identity the ground location and nature of perception. So the nature of perception is being and having been employed, self-valued, criminally foreign influenced, weaponized, worse, or your prevented free speech. So, and then they pretend passions and emotions anyway, and leaving out how exception is. In other words, passions and emotions have relationship to 5 different identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. You could have more than one passion and emotion about this, a whole bunch of things. So they're preventing people from having free speech and counters to identity thefts and frauds because of the roles remotely of instances with the people that the instances, the names we know involved with instances, real and made up, in our lives, described to and observed as ourselves, and where there are aspects where we can't observe everything, and everyone thinks they have insights into something. Our value progression, our course of human events, it is in a theater that has perceptions, the names A through Z, self-valuing roles with illusions, like sequence shifts. And that's relevant because simultaneously they make them self-value roles with uses of it that are simultaneously subtle but / overt. Sometimes they're overt / subtle. There is one identity of volume that has a differentially constant identity of relationship to ourselves as itself. And we are increasingly not paying attention to what its system that causes positive value nature progressions acts in nature. So a criminal insidiousness nature is going to have different takes on positive. Is going to have different takes on their quality of time treatments. And then they're going to pretend. Then they're stacking roles with more and more names, and valuing their roles with more and more instances, stacked against strangers who they're forcing to fake words. WFSB attached me to fake words. They attached little kids to fake locations, fake ties to doctors. They got away with this because the various natures of courts and their kids are involved also. They got away with this because other countries are keeping them used remotely, down to the uses of the Taekwondo places all along Route 3, all along Salsdene Highway, all along their treatments of every fact treatment, every process already, originally and still. That's evidence. They switch names and forge names and fabricate audio and video into databases to hide this. And then if we treat that without treating how the other countries are here, that's why we have to go back to in time. Because these are people involved with predicate acts at that same school, that's involved with other schools with predicate acts wire crimes, preventing me short words and then attaching me to more and more fake words. They've been doing this to others, pretending we make conspiracy theories, say we're saying bad things about others, and they're pretending the conversation is in it. They're exploiting exceptions and exception nature that way. This is why and how we have police departments that are overtly / insidiously rude and violent against their citizens while pretending other. How they get the audacity to increasingly to insidiously / overtly hide that while they're stealing us to fake words, and they're doing that. When they do such like that and have done it, they did it in collusion with way worse, and that was exploited per the motivations against strangers rules. We have to understand what they're doing with locations. You have to have mandated law followed. So the people who police the internet, regardless of it's this company or this company, but Facebook and Facebook police, the policing of Facebook, their rules with Mr. Zuckerberg, speaking with him, individual uses him in Congress, sequence shifts. The former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, is involved with sequence shifts, remote uses of multiple administrations, with people involved with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, through time intercities, on and off campuses, and on and off private database relationships, on and off cases, treatments, investigations, and investigators used for offensive evidence reception, racketeering, sequence shifts, self-value roles. Keeping more and more people self-valuing that. Insurance companies, insurance people involved with the programs with the kids and things like that. Like there's a Dean LaPointe, a John LaPointe. I also don't know them, but they're one of the ones who recorded, confessed, and demonstrated. The Dean LaPointe, there was one exception. He's one of the ones who came to my house when I was a kid, recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, confirmed. They did after through other people. That one time he came to my house, involved with he's involved with the criminal, with insurance companies and people involved with Detective Dillon and some judges and their family members involved with and uses of investigators and of cases and of depositions and of other people's names criminally foreign influenced and involved with sequence shifts, identity thefts and frauds, and using cases and things like that to pretend other, to hide what came before that, what really brought them to my presence as strangers that came to my house. I don't know the other kid's name tied to the Dean LaPointe. And there was a case. He broke his leg on my three-wheeler, and that was all recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with some acting they were doing with that, and with remote uses of the location with people back in the day that are involved with. In other words, I didn't know them. I never saw them on a school campus in my life. No, too. Because these are people involved with on-off campuses, coordinated predicate acts and wrongdoing roles, sequence shifts roles, and worse, uses of it. So WFSB recorded, confessed, demonstrated that they have roles with lawyers and judges, fabricating audio and video, and with doctors, foreign and domestic, attaching little kids to fake locations, and fake words. And fake ties to others, fake natures of ties to others. These are also families involved with overt criminal enterprises through time, and with uses of untimely deaths spots, and investigations, investigators involved with locations they may be using criminally foreign influence, juxtaposed legitimately with illegitimate, originally still increasingly. So please get them to fix that fake news. Quote, fake news, unquote. Others, like the president himself, said that there's fake news. But I'm not using that as evidence. I'm using the actual predicate acts and the methods of them and roles with that, and the actual identity thefts and frauds and roles with that, and with their neighbors, how they have the corners involved. People on off Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University also recorded, confessed to them, even a Dean Alford or someone pretending to be Dean Alford, confessed, recorded, demonstrated that there's a Joshua Stryker, and that also students from Trinity College recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed there was people with the name Olson and involved with police forms that are involved with criminally foreign influence with other countries, with identity thefts and frauds, instances, sequence shifts, roles of falsified police reports, slanders, roles acting so people can pretend things, to film things with pictures, whatever, make it look like people had words with each other. I never had one word of conversation with Eric Olson or Matt Olson. And they pretended other next to Trinity College years ago. I don't know where they live. I never had a class with them. One time they persuaded, they had roles with investigators associated with uses of teachers I had, and other people had. So then if you go back and use the teacher's name, their sense and sensibilities are not going to want that relative to their roles with. In other words, they were lied to about me though, and they'll tell you that. If they debate that, that's why they're debating as victim predators. But in other words, we will have to know this on paper. And so in other words, they're keeping everyone responding to what is multi-front and what are multi-front impositions against the kids. They're keeping people responding as qualities of factory media. They can't defend themselves and the kids at the same time. But they're trying to anyways because they have to try anyway. That's why we have to try anyway, to understand why and how. See, when someone asks to go, what did George Washington have to do with slavery? Because George Washington and our founding parents didn't have free speech because they were slaves, simply distinctly from everyone else, from the Native Americans, simply distinctly from people because if you have a pigment. And the counter is white, Italian is white, Chinese is white, all these different countries. And see, then the American citizen, now with the additional value that only completes us, only makes us temporary positive because we have them. In other words, see, Chief, we're supposed to use, our founding parents are like this to us. See, the Constitution how it was abridged originally still. They're pretending it's about opinions or about democracy because they need to hide how